I'm fired up that you're here. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So, very quickly, guys, we announced a new cohort for the course that we run called Who's Your Oprah. That is going to start. That's about how to build high impact, high access relationships. That cohort starts on August 19th. If anybody's interested, we've got a bunch of people signed up already, and I'm very excited about that. We follow that up. So that's August 19th. That starts. It goes for four sessions. August 20th, we have a legend series with Ryan Millar. Ryan's a three-time Olympian. He's a gold medalist. He was the USA Volleyball Player of the Year. He won a national championship at BYU, where he was also the NCAA Player of the Year. So an absolute legend. So I'm excited about that on August 20th. August 30th, we're going to the U.S. Open. So if you want to join us at the U.S. Open, just let us know. You got to grab tickets. We did move our Miami event. So we moved it to the 15th. So we had some complications and we had to move that event, but it's still on. We just moved it to November 15th. And we've got our retreat coming up September 29th. We've got 8 spots left. You can finance it over 12 months, no interest. So if you still want to go to the retreat, we have an incredible group of people. And then obviously we have the 5 legends who are going to be there with us, and very excited about that. So if you're interested in joining us for the retreat, let me know. We've got some new folks to the Outlier Project. So let me just explain kind of how these work. It's a different format probably than you're used to. 30-minute fireside chat with Justin and I, and then 30 minutes live Q&A. The Q&A, if you've got a question for Justin, just drop in the chat. Just say, hey, I've got a question. Kathy will tee me up, and then you can ask your question directly to Justin. So you're probably wondering, with all those letters in his last name, how the heck do you pronounce his last name? So it's Roethlingshoefer. So you got to practice that. And I think that's the reason why you didn't make it in the NHL. They said, your name's too long, can't fit it on the back of a jersey. So we're gonna have to move on. So
he's a minor league guy. That's it. He's a minor league guy. That's it. We're just gonna leave him there.
So I am incredibly excited to have Justin with us. Give you a little bit of background on Justin. He's the CEO of a company called Own It. He's a USA Today best-selling author. His latest book is The Power of Ownership. He's got 3 other ones. The Power of Ownership just came out, 3 months ago, I think, right?
It's April 30th. So whatever that is now, May, June. Yeah, 3 months.
Yep. Former performance coach for a bunch of top level collegiate teams and then a ton of pro hockey teams. So he's got an incredible pedigree. He's an unbelievable keynote speaker. He's a TEDx speaker. He's got a great podcast. Just one of the most knowledgeable people that I know when it comes to everything health and wellness, from the physical side to the spiritual and mental. He is really one of the best out there. And I think we all know that in our quest to live an extraordinary life, if that health and wellness bucket is depleted, it is really, really, really hard to live an extraordinary life. So I'm excited to get into this. Kathy, get us started. Welcome, my friend. It gets you fired up?
I'm fired up. Let's go.
Ready to roll. Ready to roll. All right. I've got a million questions for you.
Let's go.
So you grew up in Canada,
Yes, sir.
pretty talented hockey player. Uh, I think the quote was from your dad, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid. And so at an early age, I think you were probably like 13, 14, something like that, you started tracking everything. Um, and it got you from, would it be fair to say you grew up kind of like a chubby kid? And by tracking everything, it got you fit. But I think what's interesting, especially based on the work that you do today, it got to a point where you're kind of consumed and then consumed by fear that maybe you would become that kid again. And it led to some body dysmorphia. And I'd love to just talk about those early days and going through that is a pretty traumatic thing to go through. And I've got to believe that it's a part of, the man that you are today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the unique part about this whole thing is um as I leaned into this, you mentioned I was a chubby kid and never really knew it, if that makes sense, because I was highly athletic, I was active, and I was just chubby. That's like, what are you gonna do? And it's the way God made me. And as I went through this, I knew like kids would make fun of me, kids would tease me, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, like that hurts me, like that's it's traumatic for me. It's just like that's the locker room, like, hey, how are you? And I went to do a study at the University of Alberta, and my parents put this in me or put me in this to just bolster my confidence. And I remember going in for the study. We did a VO2 max test, and I was sitting there, and the guy that got on the bike before me, just when I was booked, was the goaltender for the Edmonton Oilers. His name was Ty Conklin, and Ty was 27 at the time. And I'm watching this guy, and that's who I emulate. That's who I want to be. Like you're talking about this 11-year-old kid who's just like, wow, like amazing. And I watched Ty go through this, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna be like Ty Conklin. I'm gonna get on the same thing. I'm gonna do the same thing. And as soon as I got on the bike, he comes by me and he looks at me and he goes, here's a towel. You're gonna need it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, Ty Conklin talked to me. This is so cool. Like that's who I want to be. And I went and I hit this VO2 max test, and it was amazing. I scored in the 1% or the 99th percentile, the 1 percentile, that would be pretty bad, but in the 99th percentile. And everybody in the study was like, I was the outlier. Okay, like I didn't I weighed more than everybody else. I was shorter than everybody else. I didn't watch as much TV as everybody else. My VO2 max was higher than everybody else. None of my habits aligned with the outcome in which I had. I was the outlier in all areas. And about a month later, they published all these results, and the Edmonton Journal, the biggest, um, uh, I guess, newspaper in Edmonton, published an article, and my face on the bike was on the front page of this, and it said "fat and fit?" question mark. And that was the first moment that I was kind of like, is there something wrong with me? Because it had just taken a moment that was so powerful for me, that was so like heartfelt for me, that engagement with Ty Conklin, the outcomes that I was like, yeah, like this is who I am. I am fit. I am strong. I am capable. I am powerful. And now all of a sudden planted a seed of doubt in my head. Fast forward 2.5 years, and I started to train a little bit differently. I started to do some things a little bit differently. And I ended up losing about 35 pounds over the course of that time of with zero effort. I grew 7 inches. I started training a little bit more. That's what happens. 12, pardon me, 11 to 13 years old, like welcome to puberty. And so all of a sudden, for the first time, I remember walking into the locker room after having an entire summer off. I was coming into my 14-year-old year, and parents were taking double, triple looks at me like, oh my gosh, that's Justin. Kids were saying, hey, Justin, you look so great. Hey, Justin, what did you do? And at the same time, I'm like, the same thing I've done my entire life. I don't know. I didn't do anything differently. And I can pinpoint the moment where I literally felt fear for the first time. And it was that day at the rink where I'm getting validated for the first time. I all of a sudden feel like the way people are speaking to me is differently. I feel the way they're looking at me is differently. I feel the way that they're perceiving me is different. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have had a distorted view this entire time. And this is actually what I'm after. And it was at that moment that I had fear because I never wanted to go back to the other way. This is what life can feel like. This is what life can feel like. I don't want to go back to the other way because that was hard. That was not like this. And so that changed this mindset for me. And again, I got hyper focused, I got hyper obsessive. OCD took over, my ADD took over, my deep fear took over. And so I was measuring everything and tracking everything. And so much to a point where there was this mindset shift in my head of that I have to push. I have to go. If I'm not in pain, if I'm not doing something hard, if I'm not struggling, I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm not making progress. People are catching up to me. I'm going backwards. And so from about 14 to 17 years old, um, I I lost about 60 pounds. At one point, I was 97 pounds as a 16-year-old, going from 145 as a 13, 14-year-old. Um, I would take cold showers at night. I would sleep naked with no covers. I wouldn't allow myself to have covers because that was like a mindset thing. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd swim, I'd go running. From there, I'd all of a sudden go up and have my spare breaks in high school, and I'd exercise in the training room. From there, I'd run to every single class. I'd have to do 10 push-ups every single time I went through a door. I'd have to do 10 squats before I was able to pull anything out of my locker. If there was stairs, I'd run up them and down them twice. It was over the edge. I had fallen off the cliff. And at 16 years old, I came up one night and or pardon me, one morning, and I don't sleep at night because my body's under constant stress and strain. And so as I came up the stairs, my mom looked at me and her jaw dropped to the floor, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening?" And my face was yellow, my hands were yellow, my eyes were kind of this yellowy tone. And at that moment, they took me in, and I had liver and kidney failure. And it was this whole thing of like, look what you've done to yourself, look at where you've driven yourself. And it was it was this new realization that the fear had taken over, and this pursuit of health was actually no longer a pursuit of health. Um, uh, it was self-brutalization, if you will.
And how today, because you still are a super regimented, disciplined, consistent guy up before the sun and doing everything you can to maximize your health, how do you strike that balance now?
It's a great question, and um, I'll take I'll take 3 seconds to kind of just outline where that went. I was fortunate and blessed enough that I met a coach that I had at 12 years old for one of my travel teams. Saw me walk in when I was 17 years old, and to a tryout camp, and he looked at me like 4 times. He didn't recognize me. Asked me if I was okay, and then called my parents that afternoon, and he became my mentor for the next 3 years, and he just changed my mindset, changed my heart set, changed my habit set. And over the course of that time, I got healthy, and I came down to college on a hockey scholarship. I did a double undergraduate degree in exercise science nutrition. Went and got my master's degree, went and did my doctorate, just with this deep desire to understand the body better because I had been through so much. I'd been through so much at such a young age. I had all this knowledge and wisdom. Like at 14 years old, I could recite the glycemic index. I could help you understand the calorical differentiations between macronutrients. It was wild. Like my understanding of heart rate variability and all these different things, sleep quality. Like I say, I had a doctorate by 16 just because of how obsessed I was in this. And in going through this now and seeing this differentiation, there's a difference between pushing and pushing hard for the sense out of fear to the sense of like, no, this is what I'm doing because this is who I am and I'm solid in who I am. It's why I think in today's society, and you guys might talk about this often, but it's why I have a big pushback um, against narratives like David Goggins. I have a major pushback as to the narrative of stay hard, do hard things. I think hard things are amazing, but what's the purpose and reason behind hard things? And what's hard to you may not be hard to somebody else, or what's hard to you might be like far over the edge for somebody else. And in working now with executives, business leaders, business owners, people who are elite in what they do, there's this lack of rhythm that I call it. This lack of rhythm between understanding the difference between pushing in a business sense and finding success and pushing in a personal sense and finding success. It's why we're disintegrating our health and why our health is falling apart. Mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress, you cannot differentiate between any of those. Stress is stress. You go for a 1 mile run, you're trying to figure out what's going on in your calling. You're in an argument with your sister, your husband, your wife, your kids. You're sending your kids to college. None of these stressors are differentiated within the body. They're all absorbed. Your body keeps the score. And so often, people who are high striving, who are pushers, who are doers, they have an inability to break off from the concept of if I'm not working hard, if it doesn't hurt, if I'm not tired, if I'm not exhausted, I'm not making progress. And that has been just the pinnacle that's hurt me, or pardon me, that's broken my heart. Last story I'll tell is when I was stepping into my 8th year as a performance director in the NHL. I was with the Anaheim Ducks at this point. For the previous 7 years, we had been the least injured team and the least sick team in the league. And it was a lot of because of the hyper personalization in which we poured into these people. And I still remember just one of my mentors coming up to me. He was a very successful business owner, and he came up to me and he said, Justin, I love what you're doing with these athletes. Can you do it for me? I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I just don't know what's happening. And I just can't believe I said this. I said, no, I only work with athletes. And he came back to me about a month later and he said, Justin, like, I keep watching some of the things you're putting out. I have some more questions as to like what's going on, but I don't feel well. My doctors can't figure it out. Can you help me? And I said, Tom, I would love to, but I only work with NHL guys. I can't help you. And 6 months later, he passed away. And it just like changed the way that I thought about things. Because not only was it my ego, but it was also my insecurity of not being able to think that I couldn't help other people, that I couldn't take what was happening here. And it was at that moment that I realized that health is not an athlete problem, health is a human problem. And how do we establish this system to steward this thing that we're living in for the 80, 90, 100, 150 years that we get to be here for? And when people preach longevity of, oh, we're going to help you live to 120 years old, nobody knows how long you're going to live. But here's what I can tell you. What we can help you maximize is health span with lifespan.
Mhm.
If I live to 79 years old, I guarantee you the morning I die, I'm going to be hiking a mountain. If I live to 119 years old, I guarantee you the morning before, I'm going to be hiking a mountain. I don't want to live to 105 years old and be like 105-year-olds that I look at. I don't want to live to 95 years old and look at the 95 years olds that are living. I want to be different. I want to be the outlier. Every single person, I saw this on your tagline underneath. Every single person has the opportunity to be extraordinary.
Yep.
But it takes living differently to earn the right to experience it.
So you have started a very, very successful company called Own It, with a very audacious goal, which is redeeming the health of the world. What does that mean and why is that important?
Yeah. So for me, we live in this world where there's more information on health now than ever before. It's confusing, it's complex. We've got people who have fear tactics all over the place. We've got people asking you to go and do things that, quite frankly, don't get anybody further down the road. And so for us, our goal is to make sure that each and every person coming through our ecosystem, each and every person that we're talking about, can make sure that we do things in a hyper personalized way so that we allow the body to do what it's meant to do, which is heal itself. The body has to make sure that it has what it has, what it has, what it needs, and that your lifestyle is in alignment with what it is that you're called to do. And so we use data, we use testing, we use these things to make it simple so that we can now drive it back to what it is that's actually required by the body. And so it's important to me because the people that we work with, the outliers, the people who are pushers, the people who are doers, the people who are trying to impact others, when we think about this, when we think about this, those are the same people that are trading their health for their mission.
Mhm.
It's the same people who think there needs to be an exchange because they're not good enough, they're not far enough along, they're not impacting at a high enough rate, they're not growing. And so it's only when we can simplify it, when we can boil it down to the key components that matter for you, that we can get you the solutions that you need. And we know that as we impact the people at the top, there's a trickle down effect to change culture, to change families, to change generations, to change mindsets, and to change heart sets of how you're living.
I've heard you say that you earn your illness. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I say there's this dichotomy. You either earn your health or you earn your illness. And it sounds harsh, and a lot of people go like, "Oh, well, that's not very nice." Well, at the same point, it's based on choices and choices we have every single day. Do we have a consistent sleep and wake time? How are we eating? Do we exercise and train each day? Do we make the decision to send 25 emails until 11 o'clock at night, or do we make the decision to have a cutoff and a boundary point in which we then go and operate the next day? How do we manage time and energy? How do we operate in a rhythm? You have a choice. I go back. Your body keeps the score. And so what happens is we live in what I call the fake health continuum. On the far left side, you've got death and disease. You've got some type of chronic illness. You've got diabetes. You're in some type of place where you're being treated for something. On the far right side, you have true health. You wake up with energy. You wake up focused. You wake up feeling great. You've got this great rhythm that you feel like you're in. But 95% of us live in this middle space called fake health. We're disease free, but we're symptom full. Headaches, nausea, fatigue, bloating. We need naps in the afternoon. We have no energy. We're suffering from brain fog all the time. And this is what the world has told us is normal. That's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. That's what it takes to be a business leader. That's what it takes to start a family. That's what it takes to be married. That's what it takes to be a mom or a dad. That's what it takes to lead a team. That's what it takes to be different. But they're all lies. And the longer that we stay there and make those decisions and normalize the dysfunction that we live in, the faster that window closes to when it shuts all of a sudden and we wake up one day and we've got diabetes. We wake up one day and we have a heart attack. We wake up one day and we look in the mirror and we go, how did I become 50, 60, 30, 20 pounds overweight? It happens suddenly because we lack the understanding.
Why is patience so important to our health?
I mean, so many, it goes back to like the first statement we talked about. Okay. The first statement we talked about is talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid. And we highly overestimate what we can get done in a month, but highly underestimate what we can get done in a year. And if you think about this, it's the lack of consistency, not the lack of intensity, that plagues us. We're not willing to do the mundane things. We're not willing to stay in it over and over again. We're not willing to lean in and do things that others do. When you talk about this, when you talk about people with extraordinary health, these people are not extraordinary. What they do is they do the ordinary things with extraordinary consistency and discipline.
Yep.
That's it. That's it. They're not extraordinary. Me being able to run a marathon in under 3:15, and then the week later going and winning the High Rocks Games for the US, it's not extraordinary. What you don't see is the 5 years of consistent preparation that went into that. Anybody on this call could do that. I am not special. I have zero talents that are uber and over above anybody else. I have poor genetics. I'm 5'10", 185 pounds. I am one step from stupid. But the one thing that I do different than a lot of people is I'm consistent.
What are a few things that everybody on this call could start to do today or tomorrow that with consistency would pay big dividends? Just a couple things that are softballs, but done with consistency over time would impact most of the people on the call.
Yeah. So the first thing I always say is you have to know your metrics. You have to understand what's happening inside your body. I'm the picture. I didn't tell this story, but I'm the picture of the external picture does not match always what's happening internally. In 2019, coming into one of my last years in the NHL, I just done a photo shoot for Men's Health. I just finished my second marathon, was doing High Rocks games on a regular basis, big time job in the National Hockey League. And I was told I wouldn't see 35. I was diagnosed with a precancerous ulcer in my stomach and 4 precancerous polyps in my colon. And all of that had to do with how I was living and the decisions I was making. High stress job, high lack of sleep, on the road all the time, et cetera, making poor choices. And it was not until I actually started to say, what if I tracked and did the same exact process that I was doing with my players for me? And so knowing your metrics, what's happening inside. And the first metric is heart rate variability. If you don't know what your heart rate variability is, or you don't even know that metric, big wake up call. Heart rate variability is the holistic metric as to how our body is adapting to stress and strain. Mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. Body doesn't know the difference. The higher your HRV score, the better adapted, or the better rhythm between stress and recovery you have implemented into your life. The lower your HRV, it's an alert saying, hey, the rhythm's out of whack. Either we're not in very good shape, we don't sleep very well, we don't eat very well, we are way too work or stress focused, in our life, and we need to create a change.
How do people figure that out?
HRV can be tracked on any wearable device. Whoop, Aura, Fitbit, Polar, Garmin, even Apple has it. But that is a metric that you need to learn and understand and really need to start to value. So number one, consistently measuring data. Data determines direction. Data validates decisions or redirects based on what it says. I'm not an emotions or feeling guy. There's 95% of the days that I wake up in the morning and I do not want to go train. I do not want to go work out. I do not want to go do the hard thing in my business. But the data validates that what I'm doing is taking me in the right direction. And that's what redefines the mindset. That's what restructures what I'm doing. So that's number one. Number two is sleep is your superpower. Like sleep is your superpower. Again, as outliers, we wear lack of sleep as a badge of honor. It's like, oh, I stayed up until 1 a.m. last night because I had to do the hard thing, because I had to do the uncommon thing. I did the thing that most people aren't willing to do. Well, actually, you probably could find 2 or 3 hours in your day that you waste time, that you're inefficient, or we could actually take a step back and go a little bit deeper. This is where you start to talk about leadership. And you've actually failed to delegate. You've actually failed to empower, and you've actually failed to share in your mission that you're on. And thus you said, oh, I'm going to take this all on myself. And so you actually just haven't stepped into a solid leadership role yet. And so it shows immaturity. It shows there's some things that we need to learn if we're actually going to go and have the impact that we truly desire. And so these are the things that we start to talk about. This is the thing that we start to actually look at. Because when we think about health and your mindset are so deeply integrated. Health and your mindset are so deeply integrated. You can't talk about physical health without talking about mental health, without talking about emotional health, without talking about spiritual health. The moment we try to dissociate them is the moment that everything becomes disintegrated and we start to see a disintegration of our health. Because it would be like me having a big, beautiful bowl of fruit and then putting a rotten apple in the middle. Within 24 hours, that whole bowl is rotten. And that's what happens inside. So coming back to your question, number one, start tracking metrics. Understand heart rate variability specifically. Number two, put a value on sleep. Make it a non-negotiable. And then if you want to combine 1 and 2, you can start to track sleep quality, understanding the depth of your sleep that you're getting. There's 4 stages to sleep: light sleep, slow wave sleep, REM sleep, and a wake cycle. How long do you spend in slow wave and REM? Should be somewhere between 38 and 50%. Stats and data show that if you consistently get sleep quality less than 38%, you have a 180% increase of some type of chronic illness.
And what's the best way to measure that? Again, Whoop, Aura.
Whoop, Aura are your big two. Garmin has does a decent job at it, but Whoop and Aura are your best bets. Gotcha. for where you're at there, and ease of accessibility.
I mean, there are so many other topics that I want to go into, but we have got a ton of questions. So, I mean, I would say, guys, pick up the power of ownership, because it's talking about ownership of your health. And if you don't have ownership of your health, all the other things that you want to achieve in life really become, nearly impossible. You're never going to achieve the things that you want to achieve. So this is just so important. But I want to be respectful of Justin's time, and I also want to make sure that you guys get to ask your questions. So Justin, you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Let's go.
Guys, keep them tight because we've got a lot of questions.
I'll try to keep the answers short too.
We're going to Florida first. We're going to Yarrow.
Hello, Justin. Thank you so much for this time. So many highlights. So I'm going to reach out on LinkedIn and maybe we keep having some conversations. But
right on.
I found it really interesting in the beginning of our time together, you sharing the kind of dichotomy that I saw in how you viewed yourself as a young child, and then what I perceived as external factors that kind of changed that perception of yourself, and then the challenges that came as you closed that circle and came back to a healthy, self view. But also hard things. I grew up with more of a subconscious perception of, if it's not hard, then you're not doing it as well as you can, in which case things should be hard. And in my professional expansion, realized that following some innate skill sets that did come naturally, I was able to excel in spaces that, sorry, my kid is, that came naturally. Not that it was easy or is ever easy, but rather than going for the hard things, because I had this perception of that's where I should apply myself, to follow some innate things and then grow further in those. Curious if you have any, because I feel like that's what you did too. But any more comments on applying ourselves to areas that come naturally to excel versus just going after hard things because it seems like that pulls more from us.
Yeah. I had somebody say to me once, Justin, what if it didn't have to be so hard? And it hit a light bulb off in my mind, thinking, well, if it's not hard, I'm not getting better. If it's not hard, I'm not doing the hard thing. And this is where I get really spiritual, in the sense of, if this is what I'm called to do, if this is where I'm supposed to go, there's a moment where, yes, I have to be refined by fire. There's moments where I need to be put into really difficult things so that it can ultimately take out all the impurities within me. I give this example of gold. If you get 14 karat gold, it's not 100% gold. There's iron, copper, nickel, all of these other alloys in there. To the naked eye, when you look at this, it's gold. But if I burn this down, there's going to be the impurities float to the top. And it's only then that you can scoop them out. Everybody looks great in easy times. Everybody looks calm. Everybody looks collected. Everybody looks like a great leader. Everybody looks strong. But it's only when you're put in fire that your true character comes out. It's only when you're put in difficult situations that your true character comes out. It's only in these areas. So be grateful for the hard things, but you're not seeking the hard things constantly. If you're seeking the hard things constantly, it's often what causes us to fall. And for me, over the course of probably from 15 to 35-ish, about 20 years, what I had to learn was that because I thrived and was successful by the world's view, doing hard things, that if I didn't seek it out, or I didn't create, even like, talk about like a brain buster, I actually had times where I created hard things in my life where they're going to be easy, but I create them. I make them hard. I make challenges. I make problems so I can then go and solve problems, because that's what I get my validation from. If we can actually step back and say, oh my gosh, if I'm on purpose and I'm doing what it is that I'm called to, I can actually have things that are working in my favor. It doesn't have to be hard all the time. It doesn't mean it's less effort, but it means you effort less. You still push, you still go. It's still doing the thing, but it's not a grind. It's not showing up and just pushing through. And so that's the I think concept I would give to you is, think about, are you doing it because the world tells you to, or are you doing it because God told you to? Are you doing it because you feel like this is what it is that I have to do, and I have a limiting belief in this area and I have to make it hard? Or is it because, no, I know this is the fire I have to walk through in order to get to the other side, which is a better version of me that's ultimately going to step into that in a more powerful way?
Great
Amazing.
answer.
Thank you.
We're going to Paul in Florida.
Oh my goodness, Justin, thank you so much for your time. Really resonated with a lot of things you said, page full of notes. Where I want to go in this conversation is, my word theme and area of focus this year became intuition. And the one question that has changed my life is like, what do you say? Because I think so many times we are so quick to ask other people. And I think we're starting to notice this with the Olympics, right? Like, people are I've seen so much joy this year because people are actually doing things for them. I would love to know, like, either like if you, I don't know if you have like a story behind it, but what tips would you share behind like getting people to really dig down and discover their identity? Because I think so many people are showing up as who people want them, how they want to be seen versus who they are.
It's a great question. And who you see yourself as will always be your glass ceiling. Who you see yourself as will always be your glass ceiling. You're stronger than you think you are. You're more powerful than you think you are. You're more capable than you think you are. You're created for more than you think you are. And what you're actually like, I often say it this way: what you're praying for does not hold a candle to what you're called for, but what you're called for, you're not yet prepared for. And it's the lack of preparation because of the lack of identity that holds us back from stepping into that. And so there's this constant dichotomy of reality versus what we see in a vision. And we're just like, I don't know how to get there. Well, the way we get there is not an external source, it's an internal source. We have to become somebody new. And it's only when we can start looking internally and healing our hearts, healing our traumas, healing our wounds, healing our heart set, healing our mindset, being so confident in who we are, that we can actually start making steps towards this. Because everything else, we talk about doing hard things, everything else is like pushing a boulder uphill in a snowstorm with ice skates on. And it's only once you heal you, only once you get confident in who you are, that all of a sudden that mountain begins to become a flat hill and you start to be able to power through in a much more confident way.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that this is recorded because I'm going to go back and watch that when things are tough. Thank you so much for that answer.
There's just one thing that came to me, and I want to talk about this for a second. Is people talk a lot about the word intention. I want to be intentional about being more positive. I want to be intentional about reading more books. But we've lost the meaning of intention. If you break the word down and you actually start to look at it, in order to be intentional, you have to be in tension. You have to be in tension. And the reason you have to be in tension and the way you can recognize it is because there's a pushback. When somebody asks you to do something, I'll give a personal example. Give a personal example. My wife would come up to me about 5 years ago and she would say, Justin, you're so defensive. Can you work on your defensiveness? I'm like, I'm not defensive. And when I sat on it, it hit a chord in me. It struck a chord in me. And the reason it struck a chord in me, that is the first sign that there's something there. And the reason you have to go in tension is because who you are and who you are called to be are in direct conflict with one another. Because it's easy to stay here. There's comfort here. There's security here. There's certainty here. You know what's here, even if it's not good. But here, there's growth. There's something you're unsure of. There's something you haven't realized yet. There's something you haven't recognized. And the intersection point is where the tension lies. And that's where the intention has to come from. And until you're willing to sit here, until you're willing to stay here, until you're willing to be comfortable here, you'll always underperform from where it is that you're called and where you desire to go.
I feel like I should say boom after everything you say. Rich Bishop, you're up.
All right, Justin, thank you very much for this. This has been awesome so far. I want to go back to one of the first things that you talked about in your story. You talked about fear really driving you to an unhealthy place.
Mm.
And I know from whether it be high-level athletes, high-level successful people in business, whatever, wherever they are in life, I know that there is a healthy fear, right? There's a healthy fear of I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of fill in the blank. Therefore, I'm going to put in that little bit of extra effort to make sure that what I produce is good and is worthwhile. But you also see people who do take it too far, whether it be on purpose or whatever. So as outliers, how should we think about that fear that we all have?
Right.
And that line between where it's healthy versus maybe where it's not healthy anymore.
It's great. I've got a tool I think that's really going to change the way that you think and the way that you do things. So when we think about fear, fear is the underlying driver to everything. It's the underlying emotion to everything. But here's the thing. Fear will send you left or right. Fear can send you into anxiety and control, or fear can send you into humility and curiosity. If you go to anxiety and fear, this is when it turns into obsessiveness. This is when it turns into rage. This is where it turns into frustration. This is when it turns into insecurity. This is when it turns into doubt. And it's only when that fear goes into humility and curiosity that it can propel you into growth and success. So the big thing you have to come back to, and this again, guys, like comes back to just being slow, like making decisions slowly, processing things. I have this acronym: slow is smooth, smooth is fast, with slow being stillness, silence, surrender. Gives you the chance to listen, so you have the opportunity to be obedient and gain wisdom for what to do next. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And when you sit into this, when you recognize there's a fear, when you've gone through something, when you're maybe stepping into a new semblance in your business, you're going to write a book, you're going to launch a program, you're going to start a new relationship, whatever the fear is, you step back and go, where's that coming from? You ask questions. That's not who I am. You're not good enough. A humble person knows I'm good enough. Where's that coming from? A curious person's going to go, man, that's not the truth. That's the enemy talking. That's trying to throw me off. That's some adversary trying to like keep me from my true calling. Versus another person, no, that's not true. I have to just control the situation harder. I have to make sure that nobody else makes decisions, because now it's going to have a bad look on me, and I'm not going to get to where I need to be, and my company is going to fold, or my book's going to be crappy, and it's not going to get to where it needs to be. It's not going to get to where it's to go. And you start to go down and down and down. Fear is the starting point of everything. And so you start with humility and curiosity. And if you can get humble and you can get curious, fear will propel you further than you could ever imagine.
A great way to reframe it. Yeah, I love that. Denise, DBK, you're up.
Hey, Justin, thank you so much. I'm a hockey mom, got a college hockey boy who now is in the business world. And you said something, I dropped it in the chat, but he and I were just talking about, we had a lot of trauma in our lives, and the trauma made us think that everything had to be hard. Mm-hmm. And making things harder than they need to be, to feel like that sense of achievement, like I did something somebody else couldn't do because I made it harder, right? And I really appreciate the way that you talk about, not just owning it, but really like listening to what's inside. How do you help people tie their values and get to like what's really inside when there are high achievers? Like I'm an overachiever. I grew up in the business world where everything was glamorized. If you were sleeping 5 hours a night, then you were doing better than the people who slept 8. Those people were lazy, right? Yeah. So how do you get people to like really get to that internal piece?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's I'm going to start with a little story. So about 6 years ago, as I was again trying to figure out who I was, this identity piece. This is why even going back to what Paul said, like your identity is the first thing that we need to work through. It's why I just love the work we do, because a lot of it it's a it's health and performance based. This and the identity is in disguise, because nobody's gonna say I have an identity issue. I need to find out who I am. But when we actually come back to it, this is how your habits and behaviors are all built, is who do you see yourself as? And when we actually step into this in a powerful way, I went out and I knew I was wanting to leave the NHL, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I had my wife and I were struggling, and I didn't know who I was. And so every race I ran, I was winning them all, and I was just like, I need to keep doing hard things because that's who I am. If I'm not winning, I'm not good enough. I'm not showing that I'm good. So I went out and I set out and I did my own 100-mile race, set up a track, and was going to do 400 laps of this thing, set up my own system and everything. On mile 900, on mile 99.5, mile 99.5, I had this lack feeling in my stomach, the same pit that I felt all the time. Not good enough. You're not good enough. And as I was coming around, I heard this voice, and it was, your win is not finishing. And I was like, nah, can't be right. Can't be right. I have to finish. I got within a half a mile of finishing, and it got so loud, your win is not finishing. And I started to sob. I stopped. I took a hard left. I jumped the fence and I walked home. And I went, and at that moment, I realized who I actually was. The hard thing for me was stopping. That was my hard, because I had to figure out who I was. Nobody cared. No one was at the finish line. No one was watching. But it was knowing who I was inside, and I had to heal that person. And I come back now to what I call the fruits of the Spirit: patience, kindness, love, gentleness, self-control, faithfulness, hopefulness, joy. If there's no fruit of the Spirit in the actions you're taking, it's not where you're supposed to be. Anxiety, fear, overwhelm, frustration, bitterness, resentment, anger, none of these are fruits of the Spirit. So you constantly are angry when you go to the gym in the morning? Well, maybe going to the gym in the morning isn't the thing that you're supposed to do. Maybe you're actually supposed to be at home walking your dog, and that's where you're supposed to start, because you have to heal internally. Maybe when you go to work in the morning and you're bitter and resentful, maybe it's a sign to you that there's something else there that you should actually be unpacking. And the hardness of where it is actually not where you're supposed to be. It's only when we can align fruits of the Spirit with what we're doing that we can heal internally and then step in powerfully to what we do. There's a difference between something being difficult and something being challenging and something helping us grow to something being hard.
I love it. Thank you.
Jared, we'll go to you. Good.
Perfect. Sorry about that, Justin. Thanks for your time today. But growing up, I was pretty grateful. I played ice hockey my whole life, still play today. Growing up, one of my good friends, his dad was a starting goalie for the Flyers for a number of years. Seeing what those guys go through, putting the toll on their body from the season, off-ice workouts, they take the gym with them everywhere they go. How do you help your athletes find that balance between pushing for progress instead of being a detriment to your own health?
Yeah, so to be honest, we work with about 90% people like you and me today, and only about 10% athletes. But I bring the same concept to play. So when I think about what we did back in the day, there's a cost to being an athlete. You just mentioned it. A cost to the training, a cost to the on-ice body contact, a cost to the games, the practices. There's a mental cost, emotional cost. There's a cost to the families. All of these things, there's a cost here. What we would do by understanding the metrics, by looking deep inside to each person, we would create a plan to mitigate the cost so that we create longevity, we create sustainability, we create the same recovery plan that would ultimately create this span. They have to become somebody new. They have to do things they haven't done before. They have to be disciplined in some of these actions so they can do what's over here really, really well. Now, the same thing happens when we talk about the outliers, the exceptional, the overachievers, the high performers, whatever tagline you want to put on them. There's a cost to being in leadership. There's a cost to being what I call first chair syndrome. First chair syndrome, when you walk into a room, everybody's looking to you for the answer. Everybody's looking for you for the solution. Everyone's looking to you for the vision. There's a cost to that. And unfortunately, the remedy that we've been told or that we've been taught is a gym membership, is a Peloton, is a vacation once a year, is a massage once a quarter. Well, that's not going to create sustainability. That's not going to create longevity. That's not going to create any of these things. And it's why our leaders, it's why the outliers, it's why the high performers, it's why the high achievers are constantly trading their health for their mission. And it's only when we can start to get really clear on how do we create a remedy that's personalized, customized, sustainable, and you can be held accountable to, that we can start to see the change of cost and the repair of cost of what it takes to be in the shoes that each and every one of you sit in. Because you don't get to where you get by accident, you get to where you get through intentionality. And in order to get there, you have to be okay sitting in tension, doing what's uncommon and doing what is difficult. And a lot of times it's not the hard thing. It's not the workout till you're puking. It's not the staying up late until you're exhausted. It's not the intermittent fasting till you're going to eat your left arm. In fact, it's shutting the email off. In fact, it's going to bed. In fact, it's waking up and going for a walk with your spouse. It's the things that are hard that bring a new level of dimension to you as a human being so you can impact people in a big, big way because you're stronger than you think, you're more capable than you think, you're more powerful than you think. But it's only until you change the way you live that you can truly realize the potential that's there.
That's awesome. Thank you, Justin.
This has been an incredible hour, and it went by in a nanosecond. I have so Heather Monahan introduced Justin and I. He's been a mentor to her son Dylan and a good friend to Heather. I've called Heather multiple times and told her thank you so much for the introduction. I think I owe her another phone call to thank her once again. This is tremendous. So we're a community of now 700 plus people in 34 countries. What can we do, Justin, to help support you? Obviously, buy the book, leave a review on Amazon. Super important. What else can we do as a community to lift you up?
I appreciate you guys. To be honest with you, is the podcast is called The Own It Show. Feel free to go take a listen there. It's a lot of this stuff in many different ways. The book, The Power of Ownership, super powerful. These are all low cost, free ways. Engage with me on social. I try to make myself as available as possible. And then if there's anything that I or our team can do for you, whether it's coming and speaking at an event, whether it's coming and speaking into your to your team, whether that's just engaging and helping you. Maybe you're in a moment where you're in this struggle of not knowing which way to go or how to actually do this, and maybe something resonated. Just reach out through social media because we're in a time in history right now where outliers, leaders, and people of excellence are needed. You guys are needed. And if we fail to look after ourselves and steward ourselves well, there's not enough of us to go around. And so my mission is truly to make sure that we are the ecosystem and the ecosphere to help the health of the leader, the outlier, the change maker, so that we can impact people at a higher way.
This has been unbelievable. I appreciate you, my man. You know that. I look forward to every conversation we have. So thank you for really giving us everything you got for this hour. It's been tremendous.
Absolutely, guys. I appreciate you guys. The last thing I'll say to you guys, just in closing, is if as you go forward, every step you make to develop yourself, you're going to have a voice in your head saying you're going the wrong way. But if that was the correct voice talking to you, that correct voice would never tell you to divide, would never tell you you're not worth it, would never tell you you're not good enough, would never tell you to not help somebody, would never tell you to not grow, would never tell you that you should exploit hate on people, would never give you anxiety, fear, or any type of negative emotion. It's the first tip, the first clue that you're going the wrong way or listening to the wrong voice, is that it's not powering, it's not uplifting, it's not positive, and it's not growth minded. You're stronger than you think, you're more capable than you think, you're more powerful than you think. So start living differently.
Love it. Thank you, my man. You're the best.
Appreciate you guys. Have a great day.
Appreciate you.